Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Nick Files. I'm your host, Nick Mulay. First off, I got to say it's definitely great to be back after a very good, very long paranormal road trip. And I got to say, what a trip that was. It was definitely a lot of fun. We had a great time. Um, if I wanted to, I would have basically covered the entire show, talking about how everything went and the experiences that we had. But that would take too much. It would take a while for me to explain everything, but I'll be explaining. We're going to be talking about that on Supernatural Talk most likely next week. Of course, I'll be giving my side of the story when I'm on To the Grave and Back on Thursday, and also the Frighteners on Friday. So don't need to explain it right now, but it will, eventually I will have that chance. So today, I got quite a good special episode for you guys. I know, of course, for the last couple of weeks, we had to kind of take our attention away from what I was talking about previously, which was a lot of different haunted locations throughout the state of Ohio, in particular Mansfield and Athens, Ohio. And that was because obviously of this trip and also from a few special requests, which I have no problem with whatsoever. It was awesome that I was able to add additional locations to the show, so that's just as good to me. The more the merrier. What's up, Scott? Good to see you. So, but now after a couple of weeks, we're finally going to have that opportunity now to kind of go back to where we were originally, kind of like where we left off. In this case, of Mansfield, Ohio. I got quite a number of locations to present because a lot of the slideshows are relatively short. Once again, I'm not sure exactly how many we're going to be able to go through today because there is quite a lot of them. And there's probably most likely a chance we might have to also do a part 3 for Mansfield. But we'll see how much we can get through. And also, what else? Well, the other thing too is a lot of the locations that I'm going to be presenting mostly are of historical significance. Not very many haunted stories behind them, but I do have a few of them. But like I said, with what I do on the show, the idea is to give a lot of attention to these buildings that certainly don't get as much attention or variety compared to other locations, especially a lot of the haunted ones. So I think it was absolutely necessary to present them. But just before we get started, I do have to send the link of the show to, and bear with me for just a second. I got to send this to the It's Haunted Network page, and then I also got to send this to somebody by request. So give me just 1 second here. If only there was a quicker way to do this. Okay. Okay, on live right now. Okay. See, this is why I need to get like an introduction so that way it can hold me off before I get started with everything. What's up, Nigel? But good part is an introduction and outro is currently in development. So okay, so let me just send the link here. Send it here. Okay, so one other spot I got to send this to. Yep. Glad to hear that, Nigel. That's awesome. Okay, I think I was able to share this out as best as I could. And oh wait, I forgot to add this to the It's Haunted Network. Yeah, go ahead. For those who are tuning in, you guys got questions? Keep the conversation rolling while I'm getting this. While I'm sending this out. I'm doing great, Nigel. Thanks for asking. So, the first. Hey, what's up, Sam? Great to see you. Great to see you again. Awesome. Thank you, Sam. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm just putting this on the last network and then we're all set. Right. Okay, so all right, I think that's just about it. So without further ado, let's get started. So I got the first location I got for today from another area of Mansfield, Ohio is what's up, Yvonne? Good to see you. So, man, we're getting a lot of people here. What's good to see you, Robert? Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so from this point on, as usual, as I always, excuse me, lost my train of thought for a second. Um, it doesn't matter. As I always start with, I got the first location right here. It's another area of Mansfield, as I just said. The first location I have here is a location that's of historical significance. We got here in this case the Grace Episcopal Church in Mansfield, and quite a beautiful church it is. But surprisingly, for a church of this nature, it has a relatively short historical story. I mean, it has a short history story attached to it, which is a little bit surprising, not only for this, but for a few other locations I was able to find in Mansfield. And also, another word of note, the majority of the locations I have for today are mostly of churches, but again, with their history behind them, it's all quite fascinating. So, the story behind the Grace Episcopal Church is that the story of the parish is part of the story of Mansfield, Ohio. Grace Church began on October 12, 1846, by signing of the Articles of Association and the formation of the first vestry the same year that the railroads arrived to town. The first altar, which now occupies the baptistry, was handmade by the men of the congregation and traveled from home to home before a church building was constructed. The first building sat on 3rd Street where the Richland County Public Library is now, which that's the library right there, which is still standing to this day. I believe I actually have a presentation slideshow on this place too, as a matter of fact. And I have to go through the list of things that I got here. This church contained an organ purchased with funds from handicrafts made by the churchwoman. The first rectors received about $150 to $200 per year and usually did not stay for long. By the century's end, the parish looked to build a new home. The parish offered its property for $10,000 to the trustees of the planned Carnegie Library and to build in a new location with a contingency to build on its current site. Oops, I forgot to add flashes. I forgot to add effects to these pictures. Before the finalization of the move, parishioners Senator and Secretary of State John Sherman died. His funeral on October 25th, 1900, is a major event in Mansfield history. Mourners included President William McKinley. The new church was designed by local architect Vernon Redding, which you're going to hear in a lot of these slideshows, speaking of which, because Vernon Redding was very well known throughout the entire town of Mansfield because he built a lot of the buildings, especially churches, throughout the late 19th and early 20th century. So he played quite an important role in some of the construction of the town of Mansfield itself. But surprisingly, and I might have talked about him previously when we were talking about Mansfield before, that as notorious as he is, strangely, there are no photographs of Vernon Redding. My assumption most likely is that there are no photographs have managed to survive of him. So that it's probably worth bringing up that this is not someone that we're going to be able to see through a photograph. This is someone that we're going to be seeing for the most part just only in words. And also, of course, the work that he put in with these buildings throughout Mansfield. Plans called for a building designed in traditional Gothic style and with seating for 432, with an additional 60 to 70 in an adjacent chapel. Ground was broken for the church on June 30th, 1905, and a cornerstone was laid in early September of that year. By February 1906, the congregation began to meet in the basement room of the building. On November 17th, 1907, Grace Episcopal Church was dedicated with a service presided over the Right Reverend W.A. Leonard, Bishop of Ohio. In his sermon, Bishop Leonard used a verse from the second chapter of Haggai. I'm probably butchering that name right now. I will fill this house with glory, saith the Lord of hosts. The current church building was constructed between 1905 and 1914 and cost $40,000, considerably over the predicted sum of $25,000, which obviously was almost halfway more than what they were originally intending. It was constructed of Sandusky limestone, trimmed with Bedford stone. Newspaper accounts noted that the interior was different than other Mansfield churches, particularly in the massive wood beams in the ceiling and the shape of the furniture. The brass communion rail was a gift of Charles Kelly King. Many of the stained glass windows were crafted in Munich, Germany, and delayed in transit due to World War I. Nave windows temporarily featured amber glass. It was not until January 1915 that additional stained glass windows were added. This thing seems to be going a little slow today, so excuse me if things are not going as quick as they usually do. In 1956, a large classroom addition was made to Grace Church. Several years ago, a major addition was made, which provides an accessible entrance, restrooms, and a major refurbishment of the educational wing. And unfortunately, that's kind of it. This is what I was explaining. The story is relatively short. Not sure why I actually moved the text off to the side. Usually it was that's normally when I have photographs to present, but strangely enough, this is what I was talking about previously, that some of these slideshows are going to be relatively short. So, but now that I have a few seconds before I get on to the next one, let's give some more shout outs to everybody. Yes, Yvonne, it definitely is an impressive building. I'm not sure what you mean by backup as far as like if you're talking about sharing. Eric, I'm not really sure. Yes, Kate, what's up? Yes, you did. You did make it. Glad to see you here. That's awesome. What's up, Annette? Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Hello, Carl. Good to see you. Jan, what's going on? Glad you're here too. Wow, we got a lot of viewers today. That's awesome. All right, so let me get the next slideshow ready. So just bear with me for just a second. And you know what? Actually, while I'm getting this set, I'm gonna fix this up just as part of the slideshow because again, I don't know if I ever did find another photograph for this particular church, but fortunately, I just fixed that up, so it's no major issue. Oh, this one. Okay, so the next slideshow I have, this one actually is. You know what? Let me see. No, you know what? Let's do this one first because this is also a short one, and the next slideshow after this one will probably take up most of the show for this case. So let me go through this fun routine as always. And okay, here we go. All right, we're all set. So on to the next location. So this next one, which this is not this also was not a haunted location either, but again, the history is quite fascinating. This one we got here is what's known in this case. This is called the. I forgot to add a fade in for this one too. The Kingwood Center Mansion, and it's quite a beautiful location indeed. But it's really surprising such a location like this. I've never really found any type of paranormal stories occurring in this building, but the history is still quite fascinating regardless. So the story for this one starts with Mr. Charles Kelly King, who began making his fortune when he was hired by the Ohio Brass Company as its first electrical engineer in 1893. And this is a photo of him. One of the very few photos I was actually able to find of him when he was actually younger. As a matter of fact, most of the photos of him are when he's older. So I was very fortunate to find a photo of him when he was younger. He led Ohio Brass into new ventures, particularly the manufacture of electrical fittings for railroads and trolleys, which this was the Ohio Brass Company. Mr. King was responsible for much of the company's success, and he eventually became president and chairman of the board of Ohio Brass. Mr. King was married and divorced twice and had no children. Soon after Charles Kelly King's marriage to Louise Mack in 1923, the planning of Kingwood Hall commenced with construction beginning in 1926. Once completed, the original home on the property was divided into 3 sections and moved across the street to Glenback Lane in Mansfield, Ohio. Louise and her son Robert only lived with King in Kingwood Hall until their divorce in 1930. Charles Kelly King, or CK, or Kelly, as his closest friends called him, continued to reside in Kingwood Hall. So he did travel quite a lot and enjoyed winters in Florida, but always considered Kingwood his home. Kingwood Hall was designed in a French provincial style with Georgian revival influences by Clarence Mack, who made a career of building luxurious houses in the Cleveland, Ohio, Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and later Palm Beach, Florida areas. As a matter of fact, that's I forgot to say that I had a photo of Clarence Mack too. Cleveland-based landscape architects Pitkin and Mott designed and built simple geometric elements, half circles, and axial layouts using native stone, timber, and vernacular workmanship, exemplifying the English arts and craft styles of Gertrude Jekyll, Edward Lutyens, and Lawrence Weaver. The gardens were built around the King's existing swimming pool and were designed in a manner that forced access to the pool through an adjoining garden room. The design was described in The American Architect as the pictorial aspect of old English towns and included a sunken garden, the swimming pools surrounded by framing trellises, if I'm saying that right, and a turf of mints around reflecting pool and paths through a less formal wooded garden, which these are actually forgot. This is actually a photo of the swimming pool, which I believe to this day no longer exists, but it did obviously when they first built it. The estate's perimeter included informal groupings of deciduous and evergreen trees, which articulated the edges of open lawn. Since expanded upon, are nationally significant masterpieces of landscape architecture. Yeah, it says King's swimming pool was reimagined into a flower bed in the 1950s. The home was built during a period of history from 1895 to the 1930s, called the Country Place era, in which particularly wealthy Americans had a common calling to pursue the ideal of country life, as epitomized by the English country home. Prior to Mr. King's death, he had commissioned to study. See, I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit ahead. I just want to make sure because it's been a while since I've seen some of these slideshows, just to make sure that there were no photos that were supposed to follow. But prior to Mr. King's death, he had commissioned a study by the National Recreation Association to assist him in determining the future use of his beloved Kingwood. The Charles Kelly King Number 3 Trust was established to operate Kingwood, providing both funding and operational guidance. Okay, I guess there are no photographs for this side. Following Mr. King's death in I don't know what's going on here, but apparently, something tells me there's supposed to be photographs here, but for some reason they're not showing up. Give me 1 second here, guys. Did I ever? Oh man, I guess I never put any of the photographs. Damn it. All right, well, it is what it is. I mean, I'm going to be presenting them again anyway, so it doesn't really matter. The information is no less interesting. So Let me get that back up, and we'll just continue where we left off. Oh, come on. Oops, damn it. You gotta love technology. All right, let's try this again. Okay, here we go. So oh wait, I already read this. Never mind. So following Mr. King's death in 1952, the mansion was utilized for offices, a horticultural library, events, classes, and more. So, but in addition, bedroom furnishings were sold to make room for offices. But most of Mr. King's original furnishings were retained and are now used to present many rooms in Kingwood Hall, much as they were during his residency. In October of 1953, the estate opened as a public garden to a private foundation. On November 7th of 1976, which again is typical of such historic locations, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places. Now, as Kingwood Center Gardens has grown significantly, the house has gradually been used less for operational activities and more as an historic home. In 2020, the administrative offices moved out of the house and into the garden gateway. Additionally, the restored the third floor, project kicked off in efforts began to renovate and restore the third floor living quarters. And of course, most recently in 2021, Mr. and Mrs. King's bedrooms and bathrooms, the adjoining boudoir, if I'm saying that right, and the staff quarters became open for scheduled guided tours. So up until then, from what I've seen in the research, was that these were obviously areas that were not really open to the public for several years. So it was just recently, about 2 years ago, that they finally opened them for guests. So currently, Kingwood Hall contains 5 levels, including a basement, 3 living levels, and a full attic. There are over 40 rooms, including 5 main bedrooms, 4 servant quarters, 10 bathrooms, an elevator, whole house vacuum system, and 12 fireplaces, each uniquely designed. The house encloses about 20,000 square feet of floor space. Now, as far as today it offers multiple tours, workshops, and events, and educational activities across its 47 acres. And again, I still can't believe that. See, I must have gotten relatively distracted when I was working on all these presentations, that I must have forgot to add the photographs of it. But again, no major loss. Again, I'll go back later today to fill in the rest of the photographs. And hopefully when I do have the chance of presenting this location again, we will be able to cover it fully with detail. So once again, before we get to the next one, because this next slideshow is going to be definitely longer than the previous two, let's get to more of the shout outs here. What's up, Kelly in Australia? Wow, you guys are just starting your day. Beautiful building will last. They sure as hell don't do buildings like this anymore. That's for sure not. Jan, looks like you got away for a good vacation pep in your step. You're pretty much right on that, Jan. Oh man, I don't even know what to really say, because that was truly an awesome trip that we did. So that was, and also, believe it or not, one other announcement before we get to this next slideshow. I'm actually once again going out of town again this weekend, but this time really just for a one-day trip. This time, and it's not as far as it was for Colorado. So this time I'm heading out to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it's actually something I'm really excited to. As a matter of fact, we're going back to a location that I previously was at earlier this year. I also covered on the show, and I'm going back this weekend, in which I am officially making my return along with my good friend Tom McNicholas to the Bell Mansion in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And, well, I don't want to skip too many details, and I'm not sure how it's going to fully work because I know they have some main guests for this. I don't know if we're actually going to be interviewed or not. It really depends. I just know that we are going to be in it one way or another, but we're going to be featured in Keith Age. We're meeting up with Keith Age along with several other investigators, and we're going to be in a documentary series that he's working on, which is his series Bourbon Spirits, which I'm super excited about. So I really can't wait for this one. So it's going to be awesome. And of course, since I just recently covered the Bell Mansion, there's no need to cover it again just yet, but definitely at a later time because I'm also trying to get more additional information of the Bell Mansion. Because if you guys remember from a few weeks ago when I did cover that place, the story of it was not very long as I originally hoped. But hopefully, as time goes on, I could eventually add more to the history and of course paranormal side of things for the mansion. So it's going to be awesome. Yes, Jan, it was amazing. Words cannot even describe it. Okay, so Kelly here, love when people take the time to refer. Yeah, and that's what it really should be all about. Is really refurbishing and restoring these locations. I mean, really, they really got to start doing that with a lot of these locations. So, and speaking of which, I got the next location all ready to go. Like I said, this is going to be the one that might take up a good side of the slide. I mean, take up a good portion of the slideshow. Excuse me. And this one, fortunately, too, also has all the photographs that are showing up. So let's get right down to the third location I got here. And this one is also a haunted one. So so things will get interesting. So once again, without further ado, let's get right down to business. So this location we have here is what's known as the Oak Hill Cottage, and quite a cottage there with its appearance. I'm really surprised that we haven't seen this place yet at all the times that we've been in Mansfield, but gonna have to give Tom word of note that this is definitely something we'll have to try to check out next time we're back over there. So let's just start off this building story. Oak Hill Cottage is a notable Gothic revival house completed in 1847, home of a single family from 1864 to 1965. So, over 100 years. It survives with most of its mid to late 19th century contents intact. The house has literary significance, as well as a setting and symbol in the novels of Ohio author Louis Brumfield, born in 1896 and lived till 1956. Although the architect is unknown, Oak Hill is reminiscent of and probably inspired by the picturesque Gothic style cottages illustrating contemporary pattern books such as Architecture of Country Houses and Cottage Residences by Andrew Jackson Downing, as well as the work of Alexander Jackson Davis, with whom Downing collaborated. Originally, the house was surrounded by grounds 10 acres in extent and landscaped in the picturesque style described by Brumfield as a park and well documented in 19th century photographs. As Mansfield expanded during the 20th century, development eventually reached the Oak Hill site north of downtown, and today the grounds are considerably smaller. In plan, Oak Hill Cottage is essentially a simple 4/4 with an L at the rear. 2 rooms of roughly equal size flank a center stair hall on each floor. On the west side of the floor, the 2 rooms are joined with an open root screen, in the Gothic style. Clustered columns and trefoil arches define the front and back parlors. The dining room, and behind it, the kitchen, occupy a 1.5-story wing at the rear of the stair hall. 4 bedrooms, 2 on each side of the hall, occupy the second floor. The front of the second floor hall is furnished as a small family chapel with a vaulted ceiling of gold stars on a night sky and a lancet window of diamond panes in strong, solid reds, blues, purples, greens, and yellows above a door that leads to the that leads to the porch roof. Almost like that, almost resembling a rainbow, of course. The doors and much of the woodwork are Gothic inspired, as are the French doors and most windows, which have mutants or muntins. I don't know if I'm saying that right, and paints in a chevron pattern. The exterior has steep gables with Gothic barge boards, pendants, and finials. If I'm saying that correctly, a one-story wooden porch. The full width of the symmetrical 2.5-story brick house features clustered columns. Oh, wait a minute. See, they're talking a little bit of the same information. Oh, wait a second. West side of the. Oh, that was okay. Never mind. That was in a different area of the mansion. So, one-story wooden porch. The full width of the symmetrical 2.5-story brick house features clustered columns, ogee arches, and other Gothic motifs. The house's bright white painted ornate wood trim and detailing stand out in sharp contrast against the red brick walls and slate gray roof surfaces. Because of the long occupancy, now, and this is understandable even when I'm just reading this, because of the long occupancy of the Jones family, Oak Hill has retained most of its mid to late 19th century furnishings, fixtures, and decor, as well as many of the Jones family's belongings, mementos, and even clothing, offering an accurate and detailed look at the life of a comfortable North Central Ohio family of the time. So, to kind of give a little bit more description on the original owners of the mansion, John Riley Robinson was born in Connecticut in 1810 and wound up in Mansfield after marrying a woman from Lexington. John Riley Robinson, who was a prominent Mansfield businessman, owning a flour mill, a railroad builder who was the superintendent of the Sandusky City and Mansfield Railroad, in which he was also an inventor, which reached Mansfield in 1846. A mine engineer and all-around capitalist purchased the land for his home in April of 1844 from Edward Wilkinson. He named the plot White Oak Hill. His home was later called the one perfect Gothic house I've seen in the United States by Ralph Adams Cram, architect of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. He was a business associate of attorney Charles T. Sherman and his younger brother John, who later became a senator and author of the Sherman Antitrust Act. Now, as already mentioned earlier, Oak Hill was built in 1847, situated beside an ancient oak tree on a hill overlooking the town, then a few thousand population, and close by the railroad he had helped to build clearly for Robinson's convenience, who wished to live near Mansfield Railroad and business district rather than in the neighborhoods where other houses of this scale were being built in Mansfield at the time. Oak Hill sits on a low-rise overlooking what would become later a mixed industrial and residential neighborhood known as the Flats, a lowland that lies between Oak Hill and Mansfield's central business district, situated on a hill a mile to the south. Which this is an actual map of like where the that would actually give you quite an idea of exactly where the mansion was and still is located. But while today the setting may seem incongruous, the site overlooking the Flats is part of Oak Hill's literary significance in the novels of Brumfield, a Mansfield native related to the family that called Oak Hill home. John got to live in this house. John got to live in this house for only about 12 years before a national economic panic, excuse me, and the bankruptcy of his railroad pulled the rug out from under him, and he went west to renew his fortunes. Ultimately, fortune smiled broadly upon him again as he became a well recognized figure in finance on Wall Street. Robinson owned a large flour mill on Walnut Street and was superintendent of the newly built Sandusky City and Mansfield Railroad. He was a business associate of attorney Charles T. See, it's already showing some of that same information. We can just go ahead and just move on. I'll take that out later today. So now this is quite interesting to know. Although he was a very famous businessman, unfortunately, there was quite a dark side to this man. Something that, of course, a lot of people thought he was the opposite, but in reality, that was probably not the case, because it is well known that back before the Civil War, Mansfield was intimately and extensively involved in the secret network of activists who helped escaping slaves make their way through hostile territory toward the safety of Canada, which, of course, obviously, I think, as a lot of us know already, was known as the Underground Railroad. And it is obvious, looking at Oak Hill Cottage, at the finely wrought antique quality of its architecture, that the old home dates back to that same age before the Civil War, when the Underground Railroad was in action. Now, there is a mystery and excitement about the idea of sneaking fugitive slaves through the hands of danger, and there is a tangible mystery and fascination about the romantic old house that has survived so many generations. It's fascinating, but also it seems quite natural that the threads of each of those two bits of history, both spun from the noble and shadowy past, should twine together in the fabric of scintillating old wives' tales. So this is where things are about to get kind of a relatively dark turn. The man who dreamed it up and put it on the knoll north of town owned it until the Civil War began. So of any secret concealment and passage of escaped slaves that took place in that house, it had to be under the guidance of John. But however, from what I remember seeing, actually, no, we're going to get to that in just a little bit. But in the late 1850s, Dr. Johannes Attend Jones, a traveling eye, ear, and nose specialist from New York, who later became Oak Hill's most prominent and famous owner, advertised that he was coming to this area to treat patients. One of his patients was Amanda Barr. Dr. Jones fell in love with Amanda's sister, Frances Ida, which unfortunately I was unable to find a photograph of her, and they were married in 1861. And I know what you guys are thinking, of course. Yes, she was 17 and he was 31. Now, obviously, in this day and age, it's obviously a completely different story, and of course, relatively inappropriate. But you have to remember, this was the mid 19th century, and rules about marriage was certainly far different than what it is today. Because even back in those days, people really didn't know, really how long that they were expecting to live for. So, as crazy as it was back then, although they did have probably certain laws of, like in the case of marrying somebody so young or somebody so old, they still had some type of restrictions and limited, laws and rules and regulations on how old you got to be. But this was one of them. So as crazy as it was, this was just part of life back in those days. Again, they just didn't know. Most people didn't expect to live for that long, and even those ages, in some cases, you were already like considered, well, maybe not at that time, but if you were like in your 30s, you were already considered like middle age or something like that. So it's, again, the rules and laws were far different. So It's crazy to think of how old they were at that time, but again, that was just simply part of 19th century life at that time, which because again, they no one expected to really live that long, even at that time. So 3 years later, Francis convinced him to buy Oak Hill Cottage. Now, Robinson and his family, actually, John and his family and his own family lived at Oak Hill until 1861, and 5 of his 12 children were born here. From about 1855, Robinson was associated and connected with Wells Fargo Company and involved with the establishment of the Great Southern Overland Mail. That same year, he left Oak Hill on a trip to purchase a silver mine in uh, see, I'm terrible with some of these foreign names. Beto, Batal Mexico. I'm probably butchering that name right now, but it's the best I can do. He operated the mine at great profit to his investors, who included Wells Fargo directors W.G. Fargo, Danford Barney, and Ashbel Barney. After falling on hard times financially, Robinson returned the house to the Farmers Bank, which held it until it was bought by Mr. Harvey Hall that year. One of the things that John Robinson left, aside from his jewel of a house, is a handwritten diary which he kept during his travels to Mexico to look at silver mines. This, I think, was supposed to show up actually after I mentioned about Mr. Harvey Hall, so I must have accidentally put at the wrong time, but it's not a major deal. I actually did try. I mean, there might be some information about it later in the slideshow, but I could not find anything about whatever happened to that handwritten diary. Maybe it's just because maybe it's just something that's going to be in the later part of the show. I'm not entirely sure, but I've really never found too much about whatever happened to the diary. So this is now going back to what I was saying before about supposedly the Oak Hill Cottage playing a role in the Underground Railroad. As you can see, a common legend surrounding the Oak Hill Cottage is that the house was used as a stop on the Underground Railroad. However, well, actually, no. This legend was disproved by Mrs. Ethel Zott, a relative of John Robinson, the house's first owner, during a newspaper interview. She stated, surprisingly, that despite that he lived in Ohio, she stated that she doubted he would use his home as a link in the Underground Railroad. Because, in fact, in the diary entries made by Robinson indicated that he was sympathetic to Southern slaveholding states and did not want Lincoln elected as president. The entries of his diary run from February to September of 1861, the months of American history when the Civil War was first exploding across the map. From the tone of his comments relating to the boiling political scene at the time, it is very clear that his values and sentiments were not such that he would be in any way sympathetic to conductors of the Underground Railroad, or that he would wish to be a part of it or even associated with it. In his diary entry of March 4th, which ironically enough, the day Lincoln was inaugurated as president, Robinson wrote, Lincoln must discard his abolished. I'm just having trouble with words today, but it's no major. I don't have, I always try to correct it. Lincoln must discard his oh my God, and this is such an easy word to say. Abolition friends, and adopt a conservative course and be willing to give to the South her just rights under the Constitution. That he will take such a course, I sincerely pray, and that he will take no measures of violence or coercive measures toward the states that have succeeded. This evidence and other excuse me, this evidence and other comments in his diary clearly suggests that John Robinson was not inclined to think kindly of northern abolitionists, yeah, or be hiding any fugitive slaves on the grounds of his Oak Hill estate. So, where, of course, the question is, where did this rumor of underground tunnels get started? Well, the answer to that puzzle is easily documented and involves Mr. Robinson's other house in Mansfield. So it turned out during the decade before Oak Hill Cottage was constructed, John Robinson made his living as a jeweler, and he lived on 3rd Street on the lot where the library is today. When he left 3rd Street in 1847 to move into the cottage, the property was sold to, ironically enough, the Grace Episcopal Church, who removed the Robinson house and built their towered sanctuary on his home site. 58 years later, in 1905, the Episcopals removed to a new house of worship out Park Avenue, and the 3rd Street Church was torn down to make way for a new Carnegie Library, which again I believe I have a slideshow for that one, which we might cover today, but I'm not fully sure. It may have to wait for a future episode. When contractors were excavating a basement for the library, their digging uncovered a mysterious tunneled space on the lot, a foundational piece that was not part of the old church building. Anyone with a long enough memory could recall that the 3rd Street lot had once held the house of that man who built Oak Hill Cottage. And so there was plenty of speculation as to why Robinson would want a secret hiding place tunneled in under his house. In time, the consensus of opinion was that John Robinson, the jeweler, had dug himself a safe vault in which to hide the precious stones that were his stock in trade. When he died on the East Coast in 1891, the headlines called him the wealthiest. I guess there's no pictures for this one either. When he died on the East Coast in 1891, the headlines called him the wealthiest man in Maryland, which really doesn't make a lot of sense because he, for the most part, lived in Ohio. I'm not really sure if he ever did move to Maryland. It would have been for a very short period of time. So it's strange how they put him as the wealthiest man in Maryland instead of Ohio. So as a result, after when he was pretty much away, Oak Hill was then acquired by Dr. Joannes Jones in 1864 and was the home of his family for over a century. It was Dr. Jones's wife, Frances Barr Jones, and their 4 daughters, Medell, Bess, Ida, and Leo, who made Oak Hill Cottage a showplace and the centerpiece of Mansfield's leading social affairs at the time. It was the habit of Dr. Jones to hold informal receptions for musicians who were visiting and performing in Mansfield at Oak Hill. Frances persuaded Dr. Jones to buy Oak Hill for her. The Jones family's renovations turned the house into even more of a showplace. Oh, geez, I hope that the rest of the slide is not like this. When Dr. Jones bought the house, he replaced fireplace surrounds and mantel shelves with the ones that are presently in the house, except the 2 in the parlor, which are original. The other 5 are different from these, and each other and are Italian marble. On the marble mantel in the dining room, there was a letter J carved into it. He also imported the beautiful framed mirrors from France, and they shipped furniture from New York. They also kept the house updated as technology improved. Natural gas services were available, believe it or not, in 1864, and Dr. Jones had the service brought to Oak Hill and to use for lighting and heating. All but 4 of the chandeliers in the house are original. They were then taken and part of that reason is because they were taken down during the restoration and refurbished and wired for electricity. Dr. Jones installed gas burners in the fireplace to provide heat. Indoor plumbing was installed in 1877, connected to the new city waterworks. Bathrooms on the first and second floors were installed with hot and cold running water, and a third tap for rainwater collected in the cistern. The furniture in the house was purchased, of course, by the Jones family themselves. Most of it was purchased in New York City and brought to Mansfield by train. Is that? Oh, okay. I thought there was for some reason the key wasn't going, but now I got it. And of course, more additions that were added, which were furnaces that were installed sometime prior to 1896 with ductwork to the first floor only. The house was a social center of the community for many years, well into the 20th century. Sadly, though, Dr. Jones died in 1895, so really not long after John had passed away. And his funeral services, believe it or not, were held at Oak Hill Cottage. So that's also another interesting concept about this, is that, and this was, of course, typical for late 19th, early 20th century funerals, is that they often usually held them at the owner's homes. And of course, additionally, his wife Frances lived on in the home until her death in 1912. But prior to his death, Dr. Jones traveled city to city in his medical practice, advertising ahead of his arrivals and charging enormous fees for his cures. All of the furnishings and artifacts throughout the house, like I said, as already mentioned earlier, belonged to the Jones family, including clothing, photographs, furniture, and personal belongings from Victorian times. Robinson's choice to build in the Gothic Revival style reflected his sophistication in the latest trends in architecture. John Sherman also built his first home of a similar style and grandeur in the same year. Its fate was to be turned on and of course, obviously, from what I've seen with a lot of these places, after they passed away, its fate was to be turned into apartments in later years and torn down in the 1960s, which that would have just been unheard of, obviously, to tear down such a historic structure of this nature. But actually, as a matter of fact, before it was going to be an apartment, after Joanne and Frances passed away, the property was divided and sold in 1923 after the eldest daughter, Ida, died, destroying the original design for the grounds. The last private owner of the house was the Joneses' youngest daughter, Lily, I guess that's how I'm saying that right, who moved back into the house in 1947 amongst its furnishings of bygone days, which again, is ironically enough, that was, of course, 100 years after the mansion had been built. She maintained the home until her own declining fortunes and failing health caused to allow the house to fall into disrepair. This led her to sell Oak Hill and its contents to the Richland County Historical Society in 1965. It was always her hope that one day her family home would be restored to its original splendor. Oak Hill Cottage was the focal point of Mansfield high society. Seems like it's starting to bring some of that information back again. Regularly entertaining prominent guests and dignitaries. During World War I, it hosted Margaret Wilson. What's going on here with the... Wait a minute. Hang on one second here. I could have sworn that I added photographs on this slide. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on. I know I put photographs on this one, but for some reason the the photos are completely gone. I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on here once the show's over, because I'm really starting to think that some of these slideshows had the photos, but for whatever reason, they're not showing up. So I guess this will just have to do for now, as like I said previously. But during World War I, it hosted Margaret Wilson, daughter of President Woodrow Wilson, who sang with violinist Francis McMillan as part of the Fourth Library Loan Drive. Oak Hill Cottage was the setting of the Green Bay Tree, Mansfield native and grandnephew to Mrs. Jones, Louis Brumfield's first novel. His fond memories of spending time in the home caused him to memorialize it as Shane's Castle in the 1924 novel. In Brumfield's novels, the house was a symbol of Jeffersonian ideal that had drawn settlers to the region in the early 19th century, an agrarian ideal that by the early 20th century had been largely abandoned in the face of encroaching industrialization. For Brumfield, Oak Hill was the genteel but fading old house. Its park and the lives of those who lived there was a remnant of this earlier period. The demise of the Jeffersonian ideal is a recurring theme in his work. Supposedly, two of the main characters are based on Dr. Jones's daughters. It also appears as Trefusis Castle in Brumfield's 1933 autobiographical novel, The Farm. It was depicted by illustrator Kate Lord inside the back cover of the 1946 Harper and Brothers edition. Yeah, see, it's saying the same thing again of The Farm. It's weird that it's repeating some of the same information. The home has gained national recognition as an architectural masterpiece. Ralph Adams Cram, known as the foremost Gothic Revival architect in the United States, called Oak Hill Cottage the one perfect Gothic house in the United States, which I think I mentioned earlier in the slideshow. And once again, on June 11th, 1969, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places. It is now the Oak Hill Cottage and Museum. The Historical Society has restored the house and the furniture inside to about the year 1870, which was around when most of the items inside the house had been bought originally, which obviously that fits perfectly with the mansion. It was finally opened for public tours in 1983. One of the highlights of their collection is the only surviving 1905 National Automobile, which was manufactured in Mansfield. Now, as far as today, this Gothic Revival house has been the focal point of the view to the north from the center of town ever since. Although encroached upon by the city, the elevation and orientation. See, that's weird. Okay, again, for some reason, it's not showing the photograph again. The elevation and orientation of the house projects a vision of a nearly forgotten era across the intervening industrialized valley. And of course, for such a mansion of this notoriety, and also after certain things that have happened in this mansion, it is no doubt the least bit that Oak Hill is also rumored to be haunted. Now it's a museum, open for tours and sightseeing, and there are more things in Oak Hill Cottage than meets the eye. First, there are the usual sensory phenomena. Visitors claim to feel a stifling presence of someone watching them, some even suffering panic attacks and other oddities, such as the lights on the chandelier flickering on and off. And that's just the starting point. One ghost report is that of an elderly female wearing period clothing, most often seen on the main stairway. If one spots her, never fear. She's said to be friendly and seems happy to see visitors admiring her home. She may even welcome them apparently. It's supposed no one really has been able to figure out exactly who she is, but it is supposed that she's Frances Jones, who truly loved the cottage, considering that she still stayed in the cottage until her death in 1912. She's also been, but in addition to being seen, she's also been seen fluffing the pillows and dusting in the cottage rooms, still a neat housekeeper after all these years. Some say it's an old maid still doing her duty, but the staff prefer to agree with those who thinks it's Frances, keeping her pride and joy homestead up to snuff. However, there's far more than just supposedly Frances, because there are other spooks. Other spooks are more site specific. A back stairway leads a small landing, one which is reportedly frequented by the spirit of a young boy dressed in white stockings and knee pants. He's thought to be the shadow of one of the Robinson sons who died in the home and spent his days playing on the landing. In which, again, I did my research on whatever may have happened to to this particular son of the Robinsons, and for some strange reason, I was unable to find anything about exactly how he died. So why exactly he's still remaining within the cottage, it's certainly up for question. Of course, obviously, these two spirits are not alone. In the basement, the apparition of an old man haunts the furnace area, and unfortunately, unlike the other two spirits, he has a bad vibe. No one can quite identify him, but it's no wonder he's ornery, being stuck in the cellar for all eternity. And that's pretty much it. So it's quite an fascinating story. Again, I'm not really sure what's going on with the slides here. It's just really weird that it's acting like this. But very quickly, just to get through the comments once again, because it had been a while since I've seen who's been chatting. Okay, so who do we have now? We got so I'll start off with this one with what Kelly just said. But the government preferred to send funds to other countries instead of fixing things in their own back. Yeah, it really is, Kelly. Without a shadow of a doubt, it really is. Oh, good here. Got 100 things going on. Oh, she must be talking to Sam. Jad's like, sounds like me. That's funny. Who else? What else we got? Hey, what's up, Michelle? Great to see you here. Awesome. What's up, Jeremy? Hope everything's going great in Kentucky. Certainly wish I was down there with you right now. Oh man, I really wish I was down there. I was actually supposed to go down to Kentucky originally with Jeremy to check out Fort Duffield and Waverly Hills, but unfortunately that was going to have to wait for another time. So I would have originally said, because I would have still been out of town, that I would have not been able to do a Nick Files episode or any of the shows whatsoever this week. But doesn't matter, there's always next time. So at least I'm still able to do a show regardless. All right, so it's already 5:40, and oh man, let's see what we got here. Let's see. Okay, I think depending on the slideshows, we have at least one or two. I could probably do one or two more. Let's look at the. Okay, so we're going to try to cover two of them. I can't say for sure. This next one is a pretty long one, but let's just see how we get through with this one. And if we finish up, great. And if we get to both of them, great. If not, we can always just do a part 2 for next week. So let me get through this whole fun routine once again. So give me 1 second. All right. So the next location I have presented, which is once again, this time I think is actually in the downtown area of Mansfield. It's what's known as the Bisman Building. And some of you guys might actually recognize this building because, much like the Ohio State Reformatory, this building actually made a brief appearance in the Shawshank Redemption. Nope, forgot to add a fade for that one once again. So the Bisman family, who obviously built this place, traveled by steamship from Hesse in Darmstadt, Germany, to the U.S. in 1853, ultimately settling in Mifflin. The trip lasted 65 days, which is definitely not surprising. Peter Bisman, son of Michael Bisman, would later grow to be Mansfield's wholesale grocery, tobacco, and alcohol distributing tycoon, worked just up the hill where the Bisman Wholesale Grocery Company now resides at the Tracy and Avery Company as a boy, and later decided to open his own wholesale grocery business where the Richland Carousel Park is currently located. Where the Richland Carousel now resides is where the original Bisman and Company warehouse resided. The Bisman Company, originally a wholesale grocery distributor, set its stakes in the flats of downtown Mansfield, Ohio in the early 1870s. In 1885, Peter decided it was time to expand his business into a giant, airy 50,000 square foot distribution center with easy railway and trolley car access in the flats of downtown Mansfield. The beautiful building was built in 1886 by local contractors Hancock and Dow, who also built, ironically enough, the Mansfield Reformatory and Hancock and Dow building on 4th Street in downtown Mansfield, which sadly that building no longer exists. The building would contain the most beautiful architectural properties from different style, including Romanesque and Romantic Gothic. The company moved to where it stands today at 193 North Main Street. Since the Bismans were in the business of receiving, warehousing, and distributing groceries, the building was built at an angle near the railroad tracks. So, for about 90 years, the Bisman Company supplied the greater Mansfield area with various grocery products, including Bisman's Red Band coffee, hand-rolled Cuban cigars, private label canned goods, and a wide array of alcoholic beverages. In the early 1930s, the 20 smokestacks on the north and south sides of the Bismans filled the early morning air with the rich aroma of coffee, as its own brands, Red Band Java Blend, Steel Cut, and Acme, were prepared fresh each day. Downtown residents would wake to the scent of roasting coffee beans and return home at workdays on to the fragrance of roasting peanuts. The Bisman Company ended its successful run as a grocery distributor in 1976, but remained in the beer distribution business into the early 2000s. Without having an exact number in mind, project manager Joe James said the business building had served as the filming site for hundreds of productions, particularly from music videos and movies such as The Rage, The Dead Matter, and most notably, not surprisingly, the cult classic film The Shawshank Redemption in 1994, where Brooks, actor James Whitmore, went to stay and hung himself soon after being paroled from the Shawshank prison. And once again, for some reason, damn it, they're not showing the pictures. I don't know if it's the quality or what, but I know I put photographs in this, so something's wrong. A first floor front office room of the building was transformed into the Portland Daily Bugle, editor-in-chief's office, and the facade of the building was used to portray the Brewer Hotel in the film. Ben Bisman IV, believe it or not, witnessed the filming of the movie and even served as an extra along with his wife and father. So as far as the building as of today, Benjamin Franklin Bisman IV currently owns the building with his wife Amber, and they have two sons, Ben and Bob, to carry on their legacy. And of course, to add to this too, because I'm glad I threw this one in for today, it is also rumored to be haunted. So, from what I can remember, it is believed to be extremely haunted and is the site of ghost tours and hunts. Many spirits have been seen here, including that of a man in a top hat and a long coat and a little girl. According to James, an employee with the Bisman Company named F.W. Simon was decapitated while riding the elevator down from the fourth floor, where he was floor manager on his last day of work in 1911. She's just imagine just one of those kind of things where, you're finally at your last day of work. You're probably, you're probably getting close to retirement or just starting a new job, either way. And at your very last day of work, you end up getting killed, in this case of an as a result of an accident. And being decapitated in this case, certainly a terrible way to go. There was, and also to kind of give some explanation for the little girl, there's rumors that a young girl is buried in the basement. Some who support this claim believe it could be Ruthie Bisman, the granddaughter of Peter Bisman. Strange occurrences that have happened here include footsteps being heard from empty floors above, cold spots, touching, voices, and witnesses have described black masses. Paranormal investigators have turned up many EVPs, including the word Annabella, believed to be the ghost of building owner Ben Bisman's great grandmother. So it's quite obvious from what I'm hearing is that the majority of the spirits that are said to reside in this building are mostly members of the Bisman family, that they're still here to this very day. What's going on here? Okay, something is. Oh, shoot. Okay, here we go. Because I was gonna say. Okay, I don't know what is going on with these slideshows. Something is not working right. Okay, well now with this one I got a slideshow. I mean, I got a video. So I got a video for this one. I'm not sure. Hopefully this works. Oh shoot! Don't tell me this is not working. Okay, I'm really gonna have to figure out what's going on. This is not working correctly. All right, I'm not sure. Damn, it's the first time I've ever had a problem like this before. So wait a second. Okay, so this is what I was trying to figure out. All right, so the photos are here, but for some reason they're not showing up. Some type of malfunction is occurring. I don't know I seriously don't know what it is that's causing this issue, but that's the first time I've ever had an issue like this before. Oh, we got a Twitch viewer here. King Nick. What's up, Nate? Good to see you. Yeah. Ouch. Totally. What's going on, Lauren? Good to see you. Having some technical difficulties here. Oh, man. That is just so weird. I have never had this happen before. All right. Well, let's see. Is it even worth going to the next one? Because, yeah, see, it's like, oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm not sure what's going on, but like I said, I'm gonna have to see what's up, because this has never happened before. But I think we have time for one more slideshow before we end things up. The videos are going to have to work. I mean, the videos are going to have to wait till next week. I'm just totally puzzled and confused of what the hell just happened. So, we'll get to one final slideshow, and this is one that's going to be. This is a really short one, and this one don't have too much of really a lot of photograph issues. So, but like I said, next week we'll try to watch the videos of the Bisman building next week. But very quickly, hear what Lauren just said. You're going to the filming location on Friday the 13th tomorrow. That's awesome. Definitely make sure to take some pictures. All right, so we'll just do this one, and then we'll wrap things up. And oh man, I am really. Don't think I'm laughing because I think it's funny. I am really frustrated and confused right now. I don't know what this is that's causing this issue. So this next location I have, I think it's probably more of a private location, but again, it does have some history to it. I'll still show it either way, regardless. So this next place I got here is what's known as the John Krause House. Now, this one I know for a fact doesn't have that very many photographs. So what I have in this one, I know for a fact is all we have. So the fact that the John Krause House sits where it does is something which has puzzled some historians. The house was designed with strong prairie style influences, much as its two block away neighbor, the Rufus Kern House at number 608 Park Avenue West. These two houses were built in a style which was not often found on Midwest main streets, as the influence of architects such as Frank Lloyd Wright was considered a bit modern and not exactly mainstream. Given that the Krause House at 428 Park Avenue West was built at nearly the same time as the Kern House, it is entirely likely that architect Vernon Redding, the architect of the latter, designed the former as well. John Krause was born in Mansfield, Ohio in 1848, the son of a German grocer who came to the United States the year before. Seems like in this case, from what I'm learning and from what I'm seeing here, is that it looks like a lot of the early immigrants and founders of Mansfield were mostly of German descent. A lot of them came from Germany. After assisting his father and eventually taking over the business, Krause cast his lot as head of the Mansfield Ice Company and with other manufacturing concerns. He went on to join the Bank of Mansfield, which had been established in 1892 and became its president in 1918. Krause also served in public and civic capacities, including as treasurer of Madison Township and with the Knights of Pythias and the Elks Club. Before building his Park Avenue West residence, Krause had lived in a house he had built at 133 North Wall Street about 1878, which sadly, of course, is no longer standing. John Krause was married to Amelia Bush, and they had one child who lived to adulthood, Albert. In 1903, the Mansfield News Journal reported that Krause had been injured in a runaway accident at the corner of West 4th and Penn. After his horse bolted, he was trampled by the horse as he attempted to restrain it. The newspaper account noted that there was hardly a place on his body that wasn't bruised. Sounds like he was really crushed up. Work on the Park Avenue West house began in 1909. The following notice appeared in the paper: will erect residence. John Krause will begin the erection of a dwelling house at the corner of Park Avenue West and Penn Avenue, the southwestern corner of the old Sherman residence property, within a few days, expecting to complete it early next year and occupy it as a residence. Mr. Krause will build a veneered brick. The lot was in fact purchased from the John Sherman Estate Company. As noted, the house has influences of the prairie style of architecture. It had a Spanish tiled roof when constructed and featured horizontal lines, a great overhanging roof, and casement windows. A very large front porch was supported by 3 bracketed columns. It was on this porch, in fact, that John Krause died on August 3rd, 1921. Having had foot surgery sometime before, but on the road to recovery, he passed away while sitting on the porch in conversation with a friend. Krause's funeral was held at nearby St. Luke Lutheran Church. And as far as today, in later years, the house would become a commercial property, including housing a real estate office, beauty supply business, and the Unity Center. It is listed once again on the National Register of Historic Places. And I think that's going to be just about it for today because we are just about almost out of time. So, Chad, I believe it. Don't worry, Nick. I can close my eyes and go there. I believe you could as well. I believe you could. So, wow, that was quite an amount of slideshows. We think I probably must have presented about 5 of them today, but it still goes nowhere near the record of what I presented a couple months back. I think it was like a dozen or 14 of them. So we're not even it's not even halfway to what I originally presented a few months back. Very quick, I just want to apologize for some of the technological issues that I had. Again, this was something that I'd never seen before in the slideshows. Usually, whenever I was able to copy them, that they came out perfectly fine, both the photographs and the videos. Again, I don't know what the hell just happened, but I'm gonna be figuring this out one way or another. Sure, gonna make sure that the slideshows for next week are not gonna have that same kind of effect. But like I said, next week we'll start off with the videos that we weren't able to watch from the Bisman building. So it was just I don't know. That was just so weird seeing that. Okay, so what do we got here from Lauren? Definitely bringing my pain meds for definitely. And also everybody, Lauren messaged me about this last night. She's having some cervical spine issues once again. I don't know if it was the same. I don't know if it was the result of the surgery, Lauren. Just correct me if I'm wrong. But she's having issues with her spine once again. So if you guys can all give her, send out prayers and healing energy for her, I think she'd really appreciate it. Because when I heard, it's not fun. it's never a good thing to have. So, oh wait, she said no to. Oh wait a minute. I think I know what she means by that. It's not related to the surgery. Okay. That makes total sense. I thought it was something else from a while back. So thanks for correcting me on that. Okay, so for next week, like I said, we'll continue. We'll do a part 3 of Mansfield. Like I said, we'll start off with the videos, and we'll see. Hopefully, I can get these these issues corrected. Again, it's just I'm sorry I keep repeating it. It's so weird that happened to my slideshows today. It's bizarre. So now, as far as for the other shows tomorrow, we got to the Graven back with me, Lois, and Grizzly. See, I didn't really get much detail on what we're going to be talking about on Thursday, so I don't know. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. And tomorrow night, of course, because since Jeremy's down in Kentucky, which again I should be as well, but I can't because was unable to because of transportation and work related reasons. There is no supernatural talk tomorrow night, so that will be back next week as well. And then finally for Friday on the Frighteners with me and Lois once again, and Ian and Bry. I think we might have a guest. I'm not again. I've been trying to keep up with everybody's messages, but then also finally, as a reminder, I don't know if I'm going to be doing any live investigations for this matter, but just once again, as a reminder that this Saturday I'm going back to Fort Wayne, Indiana for the Bell Mansion, along with Tom. We're going to be we're going to be meeting up with Keith H to appear in his documentary series, Bourbon Spirits. Again, I don't know if we're going to be interviewed or not. It's because I know, of course, they got some main investigators for it, but you never know. We'll just have to see how things go. But anyways, as I always like to say, in spite of the issues that I had, and thank you very much, Lauren. So sorry, the comments are coming up again. So, but as always, I want to thank you guys all so much as always. Like I always like saying too, that I not only just do this for myself, you guys are awesome, showing your support, even when I'm having these, technical difficulties. So I really appreciate you guys taking your time, hanging out, and listening to what I got presented. So thank you guys all very much. And yes, Lauren, I still will. Yeah, I know Scott is supposed to be coming on at some point. I don't know if it's this Friday, but I'm actually supposed to be going back on his show. I think within the next week or two. I don't know. I'm gonna have to find out. But anyways, thank you all once again. And damn it, just as I'm about to end it, I just love when these messages come up. You're awesome because you're awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. That really, really means a lot. You guys are awesome. Yeah, we're all awesome here. So thank you. But anyways, I gotta go before more of these comments come up because I know on the Pack channel there's a show already starting, and I believe Grizzly is currently starting his show. So thank you guys all once again. I'll see some of you guys tomorrow on To the Grave and Back. But as I always like saying, if you guys want to wait to the next episode of Nick Files, I will see some of you guys next week. So you guys all have a good night.